Hi, Logos Legacy here. So, this video is actually about spiritual economics. So, it's interesting. Well, at least to me. I don't know. If that sounds boring to you, maybe, I don't know. Okay, anyway, I'll just get to it. Right. So, I am, for a long time, before I got to spirituality, I was interested in something called the Austrian School of Economics. So it's a heterodox school of economics. It's often associated with libertarianism on the right, but in any case, um, there's there's a lot of debates online about like between them and Marxists basically, and one of the things this will be relevant, trust me, is that is often disagreed with between those of the Austrian school who believe in that and those who believe in Marxist theory is about the labor theory of value. And what the labor theory of value, at least as Marx conceptualized it, is basically saying is that there's a value to what the worker contributes to their labor, right? And that part of that is taken from them and exploited by the owner in a form of profit. And that therefore the profit and businesses, because they make profit like that, are inherently exploitative, and that it talks about basically capitalism and has only exploitative on that basis. And there's a whole theory about it, basically from Marx's perspective and why they think capitalism will fail, etc. But I always rejected that idea because I thought, well, I mean, it seems like magical thinking to think that just by laboring on something, there's a value created. And what is this value? It's just like ethereal nothingness. Like, it's like, what the fuck is this value, right? I mean, and given that I was secular at the time, I was just thought, wow, I mean, like, just laboring on something doesn't just make it make there a value that somehow is just extracted through some process. It seemed almost mystical to me, which I didn't like at the time. That you labor on something and then somehow it's wrong and exploitation and just grave injustice just because there's a profit gained and they worked. But so I was like, well, I mean, they're in a contract, right? It's consensual, it's voluntary, it's fine. So why are they so against the free market, right? At the same time, but the thing is, they had a point. The point was, and spirituality has allowed me to see it, but from a different lens from Marxists. So what this is okay. So energy in all interactions, including economic ones, but also social ones, and they're all energetic on some level, right? Now, service to others interactions are on an equal basis between souls, right? Freely giving, right? Service to self is on an unequal basis where one takes from the other, typically in a hierarchical manner, but there's it's kind of parasitical in nature, essentially. But where one partner is like one person interacts with the other, but one of them voluntarily gives it away. It's not like it's just taken by force. It's not, no, they voluntarily put themselves in that subordinate parasitic interaction, right? Now, a lot of interactions in the economy are not service to self or service to others. They are simply between people, but they're often not on an equal basis. And often people, even though it's not service to self, it's not done consciously or anything, there is a sort of extraction sort of dynamic. I mean, with feudalism, it's a clear example. The feudal lord, the knight or the lord, he has his vassals and he extracts money and resources and food or whatever from them, and they had to pledge service and allegiance to him and fight for it and stuff. In exchange, they get protected. It's an unequal sort of thing. Now, you could say that someone's working for a company, especially if it's a transnational corporation. But someone's working for a company, they do certain work, they get paid for it, but what if they don't value that work? What if they don't enjoy what they're doing and they're not putting their heart into it? And what if they feel like they're being used in some way, like it's mechanical, and they're not being valued? The subjective value of what they're putting into what they're doing is something that is important. Now, I think William Morris in the 19th century recognized the importance of valuing and putting a heart into what the work you're doing and the labor you're doing, and that when that's not happening, when it's done mechanistically, there's something lost. And we're in a society that everything's so much done industrially, there's something very important missing in that. It's heartless. And I think he understood that. And I think on some level, Marxists understand this, but because they're secular, and also because they've got a sort of often, I'm going to generalize a bit, but there's often, even in Marxist, the theory of Marx himself, there's a sort of, in my opinion, there's a sort of resentment and anger and other dense emotions kind of distorting it, which is why it's so negative about capitalism, as it calls it, and about profit, and about like it's completely doesn't look at any positives to capitalism or the market or anything. And it's a sort of, I've come across this among people who believe in it as well. I hopefully I'm not doing an ad hominem or misrepresentation or generalization too much, but like I'm aware that there's tendency where it's like it's just so outrageous and egregious that we need to fight the system and overthrow it, and they fantasize about violent revolution, and there's this energy that's very oppositional and angry and fight or flight, that's distorting the analysis, I think, even in Marx. But despite that, the actual core point of exploitation, I think there's something to it. But it's not, when we look at it from a New Age perspective, we look at the energy interactions, we say, okay, they're not equal. And also if you consider the sheer amount of trauma collectively, ancestral energy that's very dense, and imbalances in chakras on for many people, and how that manifests in the systems we live under and the way in which we live, right? Pardon me. Of course, it's going to be systems in place that reflect that. This is why it's not surprising that it was slavery and oppression, because for a long time, and feudalism as well, which by the way was actually an improvement on slavery in certain ways, in my opinion. But in any case, like, it's a reflection of the energetic interactions that are already there, and maybe they contributed to the negative energy already at themselves. These features, these civilizational ways of doing things, right? And the problems that can be seen in capitalism, so to speak, can be seen in transnational corporations and what they can get away with and how they can treat people. And when you see like factory workers who just where they work such awful conditions and hours that they literally have nets outside to catch people trying to kill themselves so they can't do it, like that sort of thing. Like, wow, right? And you see the just sheer extent to which resources are just extracted and churned out in the state of environment. Like, it reflects the energy going on, the interactions going on, right? Here's the thing. Marxists don't recognize that necessarily because they're coming from a secular perspective, but they also do recognize it. You see, I think on some level, they know something's amiss. They can tell intuitively something's off. But the way they make sense of it, especially given that they've often got angry resentful, distorted energy themselves, because often they haven't meditated or anything, which is fine. It's not a generalization. It's not a judgment. Most people have that, right? Then the theory itself and the rhetoric gets very distorted, and then they argue with people who disagree with them, or worse, and it can be very divisive, unfortunately. And ideology is, very much a matter of egoic conditioning. But here's the thing: what I realized is they've got a point that we can recognize from an energetic perspective. But here's the thing: so do the Austrian school, right? Because the Austrian school say value is subjective, that there's no like inherent value to a rock or to a pie or whatever, right? The value is in your mind as to how valuable it is, right? And they believe in something called the marginal theory of utility. And the Austrian school version of the marginal theory of utility is slightly different from what you usually get in the marginal theory of value in economics. But the Austrian school version is this. So basically, you've got like a list of things so you value certain things at the top of the list, you value the most, right? And it's like that value, the claim is that the way people value things is that it's subjective how much they value it, right? But they value some things more than others in a list, a list of subjective preferences, right? And things at the bottom are things that they'll be willing to sacrifice if they had to. Like if you're in a situation, right, you've only got this much money in a budget, and here's a list of your priorities. If this is the lowest level product, for example, you can spend your money on, and this is the lowest value to you personally, you'll be like, okay, I'm just going to sacrifice that because there's other more important things for me, right? That's their version of that. But at the same time, they're like, okay, there's not inherent value. So there's not like an inherent value to like the labor that's being done or a product, especially, and it's not linked to like the amount of labor you put into it. It just based on, and the price is reflecting that lots of people have their own set of preferences, right? And their own things they're willing to sacrifice. And basically that's their own set of subjective evaluations or valuations of things, right? And based on lots of people having those subjective evaluations, you end up, the price is a reflection of on a collective level, how people value certain things subjectively. Okay. Now, the idea that value is subjective, spiritually speaking, kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because, especially on an egoic level, there's a lot of things that we're attached to, and how to put this? So basically, like, is a chair inherently valuable? Like, it depends on what it means to you, right? Based on your thoughts and beliefs, and just a subjective assessment of things or perspective of things, right? And everyone's perspective is equally of value, but it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, doesn't it? But everyone's perspective of the value of something is sacrosanct. That's not the word I'm looking for, but it's like valid, like, but at the same time, there is a so-called divine order or divine harmony and hermetic laws, so to speak. There are laws of reality about how it works, and about how manifestation happens and how vibration works. Then there's the hologram. So there's how things in the hologram are created and manifested. And then there's the hologram itself, which is subjective. So in the hologram that we live in, that 3D is, that you can refer to like chairs and stuff, the value of these things is subjective. The value of a product is subjective. And in one's own perspective, when you labor on something, the value of what you're laboring on is actually more dependent on how much you're valuing yourself as you're laboring on it, right? If you don't value yourself or what you're doing highly, worthless to you, right? If you highly value what you're doing and it's a passion project, it's invaluable. It's super valuable to the point you can't even put a number on it, right? And so it depends on actually your energy. But here's the thing, it's still subjective. Even when it's personal to you and it's your labor that you're putting into it, or it's something you value personally a lot, or if you don't value it, that is still subjective. So basically, what I'm saying is this: value is fundamentally subjective, but at the same time, there's something about the energy you put into something as you work it, the value, the vibration of the frequency of the labor that's done, and your interaction with it and others as you labor. There's something fundamentally about that most people would prefer it to be on an equal basis, or the basis where they're not exploited or in a victim mode, where they've got autonomy and sovereignty as an individual. You see what I'm getting at, right? And so it's totally compatible to from a spiritual perspective, looking from above, to say, okay, the Marxists and the Austrian school, one is like economically really left, the other is economically really right. They're both right. You know, they're both got a point, and it's not mutually exclusive at all. And not just do we can agree with both and look at and integrate them both as part of a larger whole. And yet it's still, and as we build a new earth, as we open up to new ways of doing things, also old ways of doing things, because it's all cyclical, we can transcend the dividing lines and the battle lines, or the distinctions that for a long time have seemed to be so logical and just how it is, right? So I know this is this whole thing I've been talking about is very specific, I suppose, and I understand if you don't find it interesting, right? But it feels important to me to get this out there and to express this. Applying it to economic spirituality, it's really intriguing to me. I think it's almost like we're dealing with a new field. Well, New Age isn't really a new field, or mysticism, or reality isn't new. It's as old as it can get, right? But or at least for humanity subjectively at this time, it's kind of a new thing, so to speak. Anyway, if you got to this point, I imagine you enjoyed it. Well, yeah. So, well, have a great year, I guess. Bye.